I love you, dear one, sent Amy over the omnipad to her husband, before stowing it in a pouch on her belt. She looked up to the wall of the massive arms locker, hoping they'd at least have a similar weapon to what she preferred back in the day. Loud, cocky music blasted from somewhere in the large, but somehow still cramped arms room before a bout of boisterous laughter rolled over the shelves, followed by someone sounding like they were telling a story. She was in search of something heavy and repeating, with a large magazine, but so far all she'd located in the several rows of shelves were carbines and standard weapons. She sighed audibly as she rounded the last set of shelves and ran face first into a middle-aged woman in advanced reconnaissance infantry gear. "Ooh," Amy apologized as she nearly bowled the woman over. "I apologize, I was lost in my thoughts." Apparently, this small nook, populated by several middle-aged ex-commandos, was the source of the cocky music and laughter that filled the arms room she'd been directed to draw from. "You lost, big girl?" asked one of the soldiers, in the process of rebuilding an HSR-11 after field maintenance. "Aye," answered Ari, unsure how to take her jovial tone and threatening-sounding words. "I am looking for the heavy weapons section." She took a brief glance at the walls of this small corner of the arms room, and her eyes went wide. Heavy machine guns, anti-tank rifles, and explosive launchers were on proud display here. "It would seem that I found it," she stated pensively, as the woman clicked the receiver of her weapon together and looked at Amy, recognition flashing in her eyes for a moment. Do you own that seafood place off a 7th? She asked with a widening smile, and a wagging finger as she leaned forward. "I do, along with my husband," Amy replied, crossing her arms across her chest. "No shit," she stated with a chuckle. "Best goddamn place for an Alliance chow this side of the Ashtrash Nebula. Me and the girls stop by for your flip-fried glazed eel and red grains after jobs sometimes." "How the fuck did you get here?" she continued, waving a hand around after laughing for a second. My adopted daughter serves with Adam, and, well, is also engaged to him," Amy replied with an uncomfortable chuckle as she absent-mindedly played with her tendrils. "No shit," replied the woman with a chuckle. "But how the fuck did an Alliance commando," she gestured to Amy's armor, hastily painted with an Imperial insignia on her shoulder, "find herself on Chill?" "I had some orders I disagreed with. Strongly," she replied darkly. "I switched sides nearly 2 decades ago, and been here ever since." "That wouldn't happen to be on Vredex 7, would it?" the woman asked, setting her rifle on a shelf and slipping off the table she sat on. "It was, yes," replied Amy skeptically. "No fucking shit," laughed the woman, placing her hands on her wide hips. "I was a cherry private back then. That was my first deployment." "Ooh," asked Amy, now interested and aware that the woman wasn't trying to be caustic. It was just her personality. "Yeah, I didn't believe the rumors. Bunch of the girls were wishing about the lone Alliance commando surrounded by the bodies of her team that she'd ripped apart. Fuck," she said, in a jovial but disappointed tone, as Amy tried to push away the memories of that painful day. "I owe Smitter 100 credits." A round of laughter echoed around the room as the woman dejectedly slumped her shoulders before pulling her head back up with a smile. "I need a heavy repeater," said Amy with a grin, trying to redirect the conversation back on track. I've got you," she said, parting the members of her team and grabbing a large, quad-barreled heavy infantry weapon. "What unit you fighting with?" she asked, straining to lift the weapon off the wall before turning to Amy. "I was told I am with," she said, checking her Omnipad memo again. "Drepna 2. "Well, shit, looks like you found us," said the woman, a pained smile as she lifted the weapon up to chest high for Amy. "No matter the distance," replied Amy, reaching out with one hand as she remembered the ARI motto, picking the weapon up and resting it on her shoulder as she extended a fist with her unoccupied hand to the stunned woman. "No matter the fucking enemy," replied the woman with a broad smile as she fist bumped her happily. "Welcome to Marauder Pod." "Afternoon, ladies," stated Princess Kamalesh, strutting into the room with a negligent wave of her hand, setting her pad on the desk at the head of the briefing hall. "We've got a semi-standard door-kicking operation today, and I don't particularly give a single piece of Turok shit about formalities right now." The occupants of the room nervously chuckled, apart from Indara, who knew her aunt well enough to see right through the curt and caustic attitude she wore on her sleeve. Princess Kamalesh, or Aunt Cammy, as Indara had called her nearly her entire life, was about as blunt as noble could be, and that was the reason her grandmother had placed her at the head of Imperial Special Operations. The woman knew how to talk to grunts, but could turn it back for nobles who needed finessing. In truth, the woman was more of a mother figure in her life than her own. somehow always balancing home life with running the delicate and focused portions of the military. Every week as a child, without fail, there was a letter from her aunt when she deployed for important operations, regardless of circumstance, waiting for her in her deskpad inbox. "Good news is," stated Kamalesh, continuing her spiel, "we know where the enemy is. They're rough numbers, and there's no real risk of civilian casualties inside of the VIP on this operation. Our enemy is located in the Kolkari wilderness, in a hardened compound owned by Duchess Vikshali. Satellite recon and building permit plans show us capacity for mild air defense systems, an exo hangar, and multiple guard barracks around the manor." Kamalesh tapped a button on her pad, and thermal, visible, and infrared images all popped onto the screen next to comprehensive isometric building permits. "Bad news is that we're outnumbered at least 2-1, but we've got the edge in equipment, training, and supplies." She tapped the button on her pad, and footage, along with important freeze-framed images from Samila's drone flight, popped onto the screen, showing multiple guards, an exo, and a VTOL fighter craft. The guards were all equipped with standard marine armor and HSR 9.4 adaptive assault rifles. As it turns out, they're using previous generation equipment and, while still formidable, should be easily overcome with proper tactics, gear, and intelligence. "The mission plan," she stated, sliding the finger dramatically across the pad, putting unit information up on the screen, "is relatively simple. Pathfinding elements from Dreadnought 1 will infiltrate 5 miles to the southeast, and move in on foot to an overwatch position on Gemek Hill, relaying information on compound status, numbers, and important changes from this morning's IAR. 5 potential landing zones have been identified to the south-southwest of the compound, thanks to satellite imaging and topographical maps. Dreadnought 1's primary goal is to get eyes on each and designate locations for casualty holding points, troop landing zones, along with lanes of fire and approach for each of the units with their assault on the compound. Ideally," she sighed, "we will be able to land just shy of a kilometre out, dismount our teams, and catch the enemy by surprise, but I sincerely doubt the Duchess will go down that easy. The Orsa Actual," she gestured to Indara, "will infiltrate with Dreadnought 1 and break off upon first engagement. Her goal is to infiltrate the enemy compound undetected, find our HVT, Adam, codenamed Hele, and extract. If extraction isn't possible, they update the Tactical Operations Center, nicknamed Scepter, find a location to hunker down, and wait for the assault to finish." "While this is happening," she continued, gesturing to the 2 patrol pilots, "Thoria 1 and 2 will be carrying out negation of enemy air defense operations, along with functioning as aerial bombardment assets for ground units, provided there is a reasonable confidence to avoid collateral damage. During that time, Plutera 1 through 3 will be dropped at the TLC and move in to support the 3 avenues of approach, along with combating possible enemy exo fire. As soon as Plutera elements are deployed and begin to secure enemy ground, Killer 1 through 7 will be dropped, establishing a CHP several hundred yards behind the TLZ. Thoria 2 through 8 will be perpetually returning to base for reinforcements and rearmament, along with 7 and 8 being dedicated to casualty removal in the latter half of the engagement. Upon entrance of the compound, ground elements will split off into 3 distinct task forces, with TF1 engaging and clearing the eastmost section of the compound and focusing on the outbuildings in that locale. TF2 will shift in the manor and connected junctions in the center of the compound," she said, centering the slide on the large central building, decorated with opulent filigree and marble columns, "and focus hard on intelligence gathering operations, along with location of sensitive data, if they don't have the equipment to dig through encryption at the time. TF3 will focus on the exo hangars on the westmost section of the compound, along with disabling the enemy VTOL fighter and transport craft if possible. Remember, there's no orbitable bombardment to bail us out if we fuck this one up, ladies. The only air assets authorized for use in this operation are laser-guided munitions and directed heavy lasers. As always, Imperial propaganda and relations will be running interference to ensure this operation stays under the radar. Any mission ideas you have, put on the mission planning board on your omnipads. Any questions?" Indara sighed as she stretched in her prone position next to Samila and her 6-woman team. They'd been at the observation point for nearly 30 minutes, and were currently discussing the merits of different TLZs for the already en route forces to land at. "TLZ-1 leaves us exposed all the way up to the compound walls, and 3 leaves us wide open when we land, but has decent cover," said Samila absentmindedly, as she looked through the reconnaissance rangefinder. Indara looked back through her own RRF to the indicated points, visibly marked with large green inverted teardrops thanks to satellite troop positioning software. "If it were me," said Indara softly. "I'd land at TLZ-1 and shift through that cut up to the LOA for TLZ-3. That way we maintain cover all the way up to the enemy compound. Another possibility is landing in the drawer at TLZ-4 and splitting into 2 units for long-range support and a smaller assault force, using the boulders for cover." "All right," said Samilla, shifting to access her helmet-mounted comms. "Scepter, this is Drepna 1. Operational shift to follow." "Received, Drepna 1. Send info," came the crunchy reply. "Be advised, pathfinding has indicated that best practice for primary TLZ and approach would be landing at TLZ-1. Shift through the ditch at my position," she said, tapping her light shadow pad. "And push through the LOA plan for TLZ-3. Break." "Possible secondary approach would require immediate mission shift to land and provide overwatch from TLZ-4. Understood?" "Received, Drepna 1. Relaying intel to units." Several seconds of silence followed the communication, while Samilla sat down the RFFs and picked up her KPF-03 anti-exo rifle, sighting in the compound after shifting slightly. "Scepter to all units, mission shift. Land at TLZ-1. Shift through ditch to TLZ-3. Approach with standard mission packet from there. Scepter out." Indara grinned under her helmet, levering herself to a kneeling position as she heard the audible roar of jets through the desert mountain passes. She looked up to the small dots of light on the horizon, seeing the small fleet of shuttlecraft cresting the hills. Her grin faltered when a large explosion sounded from the compound, and then a burst of light followed from next to one of the troop transports. "Scepter, this is Thoria 3. Be advised, they have AA systems in place and we're under fire. We've taken a hit to the side, but all systems are blue," came the voice of a panic-sounding shuttle pilot over the radio. "Scepter acknowledges. Continue mission." Indara turned back to the compound, noting the large dual-barreled railgun clearly firing explosive shells at a slow interval. She looked back to the approaching craft, who had all taken a sharp downward curve, flying low to the ground, just barely avoiding the tops of the trees to avoid the AA. "Scepter, this is Neosa Actual. Beginning my info now." "Scepter acknowledges. Happy hunting." With that, she sprang to her feet, activated her active camouflage and sprint kit, and fist-bumped Samilla before she left. Indara moved through the trees at a near sprint, intending to use the defilade to speed through much of the distance before entering the compound from the northeast side. Even if it all went according to plan, she had her work cut out for her. Infiltrate an enemy compound alone, find her husband-to-be, and extract or hunker down with him? Who knew what condition he was in either? She grimaced as she considered the prospect that she might have to drag out a Nifel or menthol-dosed Adam over her shoulder without proper support. Her active camouflage might turn her into a negligible shimmer for the gas of the compound, but he had no such ability. Hell, he didn't even have his armor. Wincing as she stumbled in her tits-out sprint through the forest, she breathed in deeply to get her mind back on track. It didn't matter what condition he was in. What mattered was getting to him and getting him out. She couldn't do that while being bogged down by what-ifs. She arrived at her edge of the forest, staring at a 100-meter stretch of deforested plains before the wall of the compound rose abruptly out of the ground. The walls reminiscent of the ancient style of the Imperium, but with modern cameras, turret defences, and some very panicked women running to and fro along the ramparts. Indara smiled as she began her predatory stalk up to the walls, parting the grassland like a breath exhaled from a large animal, rather than a 7-foot-tall commando. "I'm coming, love," she thought, as she made it past the halfway point without detection. "You'll be safe in our bed within hours, and I'll lavish you with all the attention you could want."